state has lost the consummate Oregonian, but we are richer too for having known and watched a man who cared so much. Now with a complete accounting of today's events, here are Stan Wilson and Kim Gilbert.
Tom McCall died this morning at just about 8 o'clock. He was 69 years old. Governor McCall entered Good Samaritan Hospital December 13th for chemotherapy treatments. But doctors say his condition took a turn for the worse last night. Life support systems were not used to prolong his life out of respect for McCall's wish to die naturally.
Thousands of people around the country tonight are mourning the loss of the former governor, along with McCall's immediate family.
I bolted out of bed and I looked out the window and there was this beautiful mist in front of the sun and a break in the clouds and a rainbow was appearing. And I just felt that I just had this feeling like, well, Dad's gone.
According to a clock in Sam McCall's bedroom, he awoke at 7:48 this morning. 2 minutes later, his father, two-term Oregon Governor Tom McCall, was dead. Fighter that he was, McCall had finally succumbed in his long battle against cancer. 2 days ago, he told his doctors to remove the food tubes that were keeping him alive, taking only pain medication and fluids to keep comfortable.
Life support systems were not used to prolong his life, out of respect for Governor McCall's request that he be allowed to die naturally.
Less than an hour after McCall's death, telephone calls began pouring into the hospital from all over the country, with colleagues, friends, and even complete strangers offering their condolences.
Oh, that's the way it is with everybody.
11 a.m.
Okay. Good.
Many friends paid their respects at the McCall home in southwest Portland, among them Oregon Governor Victor Attia. Inside the house, Audrey McCall was sad but relieved that her husband was finally out of pain. She says her husband held on until son Tad arrived this week from Washington, D.C., and then he gave in. But through it all, McCall remained a political fighter. He savored the defeat of ballot measure 6, which would have thrown out his landmark land use planning program.
The last thing he said before he went into surgery, well, we defeated number 6. And he mentioned that often as he was lying in bed. And we know that he accomplished everything that he set out to do. When he was so ill, I would fight against his doing these things. But now I'm glad that he did.
Audrey says she was very fortunate to share her life with Tom McCall, but she says 43 years of marriage were just not enough. In southwest Portland, Steve Tytler, Channel 2 News.
Oregon Governor Victor Attia today said he felt McCall's death as a personal loss. Attia says a great Oregon voice is still, but it is still ringing.
Tom McCall is going to live really in so many of us, in the sense that he had such strong feelings that we must emulate. So many other people are going to be speaking for the thoughts that Tom has. He's left us a legacy that's still living, and it will continue to in Oregon's history. And, well, I personally feel a loss. I really do.
Condolences are also coming in tonight from Washington, D.C. President Reagan says McCall was an effective, dynamic, and constructive force for Oregon and the nation. Quote, he faced death as candidly and openly as he faced all his challenges. Most Oregon congressmen are in Washington preparing for the opening of Congress. Senator Packwood says Tom McCall was good for all of us.
He was good for the state, good for the party, good for the country. But I think as Oregon will remember him probably, it will be environment, the bottle bill, the beach bill, the Willamette Greenways, his struggle to keep Oregon livable. It always was livable, but Tom didn't want it destroyed. And I think 50 years from now, when we look back upon his legacy, that will be the one that will stand out the most.
Senator Mark Hatfield, McCall's predecessor to the governorship, says few in public life have had a greater gift of communication. McCall had a zest for life that will last beyond his years. In a telegram to Audrey McCall, Representative Lesser Coyne says that he and his wife are just two of the people blessed to have known Tom and been inspired by his humanity, courage, wisdom, and sense of duty. Governor McCall was always known as a man of the people, and the residents of this state loved him. Today, they expressed their love and their sadness at his death.
He understood Oregon and knew what Oregon needed and what was best for Oregon, I think.
Well, I thought he was one of the great conservationists of the state. He was very instrumental in leading the state down the course that they have been, and he'd be missed.
I think he did a good job while he was in office, and it was too bad that he had to die of cancer.
I think he was a wonderful man, did a lot for Oregon. I liked him very much. I was very sad to hear it.
I thought he was marvelous. I thought he was really all for, conservation and the perfect environment in Oregon.
I've met him personally several times and enjoyed talking to him. He is always very friendly and I saw him on the street several times and he'd stop and talk to you. I met him in the airport one day and he wanted to know I was going to the family reunion. He wanted to know all about the family reunion, who was coming and how many people were going to be there. And very interested, very sincere man.
And even when he was dying, he still had time to stand up for what he believed in. And I appreciate it.
It's too bad we don't have another one just like him. I thought he was probably the best thing that's happened to Oregon.
Throughout his life, Tom McCall was a fighter. For 10 years, he fought the disease that finally took his life. And for all of his life, he fought for those causes in which he believed, never compromising his principles. That's a difficult challenge for a professional politician. Fighters like Tom McCall cannot help but make enemies along the way, but they also win admirers. I am one of those. I'd like to take a few minutes now to look back on the life and career of Governor Tom McCall.
During my administration, with the team we had and the great business support we had, Oregon handled the conflict between environmental needs and economic needs more even-handedly than any place you can find possibly on the face of the earth.
If anyone was ever born to be a politician, it was Thomas Lawson McCall. His grandfather, Sam, had been governor of Massachusetts, and his mother would spend hours reading Dickens and Tolstoy to her children, challenging them to discuss and debate. But Tom McCall never considered himself a politician. Instead, he called himself a journalist on loan to the government. Born in 1913, he grew up on the family ranch in Central Oregon, was graduated from Redmond High School, and earned his degree in journalism from the University of Oregon in 1936. Although Tom McCall was a native Oregonian, his unusual voice had its roots in the family tree in Boston.
And we've got the team, we know how to command people, we know how to put them together to do the best job for the state of Oregon.
That voice was unlike anything ever heard in the state before, a voice that stood out like a discarded bottle on an Oregon highway. It seemed improbable that this squeaky voice had its origins in his towering frame, but it became his trademark and would later land him a job in broadcasting. Tom McCall's first job was with a newspaper, the Bend Bulletin, for $15 a week. He then moved to Idaho to work on the Moscow News Review and later the Oregonian. At the age of 31, Tom McCall enlisted in the Navy. He was the oldest one in boot camp. He became known as Pops, and he was the only one who couldn't do a single chin-up. He served for 16 months in the Pacific as a war correspondent. In 1946, Tom McCall went to work for KEX Radio in Portland. 3 years later, his political career took off when Governor Douglas McKay asked this leader of the Young Republicans to be his executive secretary. But then in 1954, in his first race for Congress, Tom McCall was beaten by Democrat Edith Green. It was a crushing setback and would not be his last. Tom McCall returned to television, serving as commentator for KGW-TV in Portland for the next 8 years. It was at this time that McCall undertook his most ambitious television project, a documentary entitled Pollution in Paradise.
There is scarcely a season when commercial fishermen's nets do not sometime become weighted with the thick, foul slime created by bacterial action in waste-loaded waters.
McCall candidly exposed the Willamette River as an open sewer. Later, the cleanup of this sewer would be his first priority. In 1964, Tom McCall once again loaned himself to government, becoming Oregon's Secretary of State. 2 years later, he took on Democrat Bob Straub.
Today I announce my candidacy for governor of Oregon.
Throughout his career, virtually every important political decision Tom McCall made was made with the advice and consent of his #1 advisor, his lifetime friend and wife, Audrey. Controversy seemed to follow the new governor wherever he went, but the truth was, Tom McCall relished the battle.
The manner in which this power of the press is exercised by some is the subject of intense discussion and intense debate.
He drew fire from fellow Republicans when he referred to a talk by Vice President Agnew as a dirty, bigoted little speech. He refused to support Richard Nixon in 1968, instead backing New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller for president. It was a move that may have cost him a chance to be Secretary of the Interior in the Nixon cabinet. In 1969, he fought the Army's plan to move deadly nerve gas to Oregon's Umatilla Depot. In 1970, Vortex won, perhaps McCall's most controversial move of all. It became known as the Governor's Rock Concert. At McIver State Park, 35,000 young people gathered for a music festival, complete with long hair, nudity, and pot smoking. The festival not only had Governor McCall's permission, it had his blessing. Some called it political suicide. Vortex 1 was staged with one thought in mind, to keep the peace, at a time when peace between student demonstrators and the establishment was a fragile thing. It seemed possible the Kent State tragedy could be repeated here in Portland. So the Governor's Rock Concert was called to draw young people out of the city, away from the American Legionnaires who were holding their annual convention in Portland. It worked, and worked beautifully. The final toll, no deaths, no injuries, one broken window.
We did what we had to do according to the security forces of the state of Oregon, and Vortex was the key.
But the first goal of the McCall administration was protection of Oregon's environment.
As governor of Oregon, I know there is no more important task than to involve myself directly in the campaign against air and water pollution.
It was during the McCall administration that the Willamette River was reclaimed, that the controversial Land Use Planning Board, LCDC, was adopted to orchestrate Oregon's growth, that the bottle bill became law. The bottle bill, perhaps more than any other legislation, became a symbol of the McCall years. It was during Tom McCall's second term as governor that the energy crisis hit. In 1973, with the nation facing long gas lines, Tom McCall ordered the odd-even gas rationing plan, later adopted by 24 other states.
This isn't something government can impose, but it is something Oregonians can agree voluntarily to do, to create our own system of dealing with this gasoline shortage.
Also during this time, when the rivers ran low and brownouts were threatened, Governor McCall ordered lights out throughout the state. All non-essential lighting was to be turned off. Most people complied, even though the order had doubtful legal standing. Tom McCall made national headlines when he asked travelers to visit Oregon, but not to stay here.
I always said all along it was a dangerous thing to do. It was just on the face of it. You were taking a tremendous risk playing games with Western hospitality, which is equatable with God, motherhood, and the golden arches, was the way I used to put it.
Tourism actually increased as thousands of people came to see what the nation's tallest governor was hiding. Even when he was no longer governor, Tom McCall traveled the country, selling the Oregon story to anyone who would listen. He sculpted unlikely metaphors with his improbable voice, persuading the doubters with a simple smile.
Oregon is demure and lovely, and it ought to play a little hard to get. And I think you'll all be just as sick as I am if we find it is nothing but a hungry hussy throwing herself at every stinking smokestack that's offered.
Tom McCall loved being governor, but in 1974 he was forced to step down. Oregon's constitution prohibited a third consecutive term. So McCall returned to television, this time at Channel 2 in Portland with his old compatriot Richard Ross and sparring with his old friend Marco Haggard. But he longed to be back in his old job.
I'd rather be governor than president.
In fact, Tom McCall toyed with the idea of running for president on a ticket with Gene McCarthy. Twice he considered running for the U.S. Senate. In 1978, Tom McCall tried to return to the job he had loved more than any other. But the times had changed. The Oregon story had already been written. The Tom McCall chapter of that story was closed. 24 years earlier, Tom McCall had lost the first election he had ever entered, and now he had lost his last. But in between, he had won battle after battle that changed Oregon's destiny for generations. Tom McCall was a paradox, winning battles that seemed unwinnable, then suffering crushing political defeats. He was a lifelong Republican whose political allies were often Democrats. He was a man of consuming ego who could be disarmingly humble. At once almost arrogant, yet always a crusader for all of Oregon's people. Many of the ideas that are part of the Tom McCall legacy were not his ideas, but he had that rare ability to take an idea he liked and run with it, to get people excited. And his self-confidence was contagious. Tom McCall shunned labels, but there was one label he wore with pride. He was a maverick who gave himself, heart and soul, to the state and the people he loved.
In other news tonight, Clackamas County Deputy Jack Lowry is in serious but stable condition with a gunshot wound in his abdomen. Lowry and another deputy were shot and wounded yesterday in a shootout with a man suspected of killing his wife. The suspect, Gary Godleski, is also hospitalized tonight. He was hit by a truck last night while trying to escape an Oregon City hospital. Washington County detectives believe the woman who died Tuesday of cyanide poisoning was the intended victim of a murderer. Patricia Bennett's husband and mother had been given lie detector tests. Detectives are still waiting for the results of those tests and others from the crime lab. No arrests in the case have been made so far. 2 more men have been arrested in connection with the December 19th bombing of the Pudding River Bridge near Aurora. 3 suspects have been charged with arson and assault. No other arrests are planned.
The Portland Water Bureau still doesn't know what caused a water pipe to break at a pump station near Johns Landing today. Sometime during the night, a pipe inside the station sprung a leak. Thousands of gallons of water literally filled the building. Finally this morning, one of the doors burst open, sending torrents of water down the street. Fortunately, no homes were damaged and no one was hurt. Repair crews are still working at the scene tonight. Rain continues to fall over much of the Northwest tonight, holding several Oregon rivers at flood stage. Flood warnings are still in effect for the Upper Tualatin, Yamhill, and Pudding rivers, and the Wilson and Nehalem rivers at the coast. Most rivers are expected to recede somewhat tonight and tomorrow. A burial service was held today at a Northwest Portland cemetery for Archbishop Edward Howard. 105-year-old Howard was the world's oldest when he died in Portland Tuesday.
It is playoff time, and here to tell us all about it is Mike Ross. Mike?
Stan, Raiders may go all the way. Who knows? Commissioner Pete Rozelle will escape the flak for now as the Super Bowl tournament began today without any major upsets. The #1 seed in the American Conference, the LA Raiders, beat Cleveland, up their record to 9-1. Marcus Allen caught 6 passes for 75 yards, and he ran for 72 more, but it took a while to break this game open because Ricky Feature hauled in a 43-yard Paul McDonald bomb to make it 10-10, but the Raiders added a field goal just before halftime to lead 13-10. All Raiders in the second half. Jim Plunkett, what a day. He threw for 386 yards. And look at Todd Christensen, hold on. Allen with touchdowns number 15 and 16 on the season as the Raiders win 27-10 the final. And Miami beat New England for the 15th straight time at the Orange Bowl, final 28-13 Dolphins. In D.C., Billy Sims and the Detroit Lions just gave the game away to Washington. The Lions turned it over the first 3 times they had the ball, and 3 times Joe Theismann hooked up with Alvin Garrett for touchdowns. Garrett replacing Art Monk as the Redskins win easily 31-9. They're now 9-1. In Green Bay, Bart Starr's Packers advanced to the second round. Lynn Dickey threw 4 touchdown passes, 2 to John Jefferson. J.J. caught 6 passes for 148 yards, and look at this. That overshadowed a great day by Neil Lomax, who threw for 385 yards, but the Cards lost O.J. Anderson and the game 41-16. The Blazers return to action tomorrow night. The Sonics are in town for a 7:30 game, and arriving in town this morning in time for practice is the newest Blazer, guard Don Buzzi. The Blazers signed the veteran yesterday to fill the vacancy left by Darnell Valentine. Buzzi hasn't seen action all year, so he's not quite in top shape. Now he must take a cram course in Jack Ramsey's offensive strategy.
It's not going to happen overnight, but Don's played for teams that have played a similar game to ours.
My strong points are not going one-on-one against a player, and like you say, this pattern offense and stuff is probably be to my benefit.
And to the Blazers' benefit is Boosie's solid game. He isn't flashy or fast, but he doesn't make many mistakes. He's been on the NBA All-Defensive Team 4 times. Last year set a league record for most three-point shots made. In Beaverton last night, the fast-breaking Beavers upset the #1 high school team in the state, Glencoe. Steve Fedler had 14 points for Beaverton, which led by 13 early on. But the Tide came back to tie at 55 with a minute to go. Jim Beatty had 20 points. But Eric Seifert proved the difference as Beaverton pulls it off 59-57 in the league opener. And at Lake Oswego, the hometown Lakers had a chance to beat Lake Ridge but fell as David Bullock missed a free throw, sending the game into overtime, and Lake Ridge had the last laugh in this one. Still only 40-40 after 2 overtimes, with Bob Arnold of Lake Ridge scoring with 2 seconds left to force a 4th overtime in which he scored 6 points as Lake Ridge wins it 48-42. And we'll have Oregon State highlights at 11.
All right, thanks a lot, Michael.
Okay.
Time now for weather with David Apple. We talked about the rain and the rivers swelling earlier today. Still happening, or what's going on?
That's about what we've got, Stan. A little bit of respite today and tomorrow, and that's about it. Rain is back. At least in northern Oregon, it's going to be back by at least early tomorrow evening, and we'll see rain again on Tuesday and Wednesday. Currently in Portland, it's 44 degrees. The barometer 30.0. 4-0 rising just a little bit as high pressure moves in. The humidity 89%. The freezing level over Salem this afternoon 3,200 feet. Our record high this day of 57 in 1953, 14 for a record low in 74. The sun is up tomorrow at 7:50 in the morning and it sets at 4:46. The northwest today, lots of 40s and 50s for high. 48 for a high in Portland. All down the valley, 40s and 50s. The hot spot, Brookings, the Banana Belt, 56 degrees. Heavy rain amounts all along the coast, almost an inch up in the coast of Washington and over an inch on the Oregon coast. Take a look at the national chart right now. Take a look at some of the rain that is falling out in the southeastern part of the United States. Lots of rain in through Florida, in through the Panhandle, through Louisiana, and down here, heavy rain amounts and thunderstorms there. Over in the western part of the states, here's the front that went through. It's already passed us. Still some lingering snow showers behind it. Behind that, a little bit of high pressure trying to make its way in, but behind that, a little bit of a disturbance up in the Gulf, and that could bring a renewal of rain to the northern part of the states by late tomorrow. Here's our forecast as we go into Sunday. Out on the coast, look for a little bit of rain tonight, with the showers decreasing, with the rain returning again late Sunday. Up in the valley, much the same thing, decreasing showers, but the rain will be back by late Sunday night into Monday. Up in the Cascades, a little bit of clearing, the rain or snow again by late Sunday, that freezing level 5,000 feet. In the Gorge, decreasing showers, the rain is back there by late Sunday. In central and eastern Oregon, only partly cloudy, but quite a bit cooler. Overnight lows down near 20. In Portland, Vancouver, our showers ending overnight and rain again by late Sunday, and just more of the same.
All right, thanks a lot, David. Up next, we'll have some final thoughts about Tom McCall. Be right back.
Governor McCall, as you know, was a commentator here on Channel 2 News. He felt at home here, and he made himself at home here, too. McCall was always known for his messy desk, and this is how it looked today. McCall's glass is still sitting on top of some papers, a few personal mementos, even a piece of script paper in the typewriter. McCall worked up until near the end, always eager to write the next commentary. Those of us in the newsroom will miss his smile, his curiosity, and his friendship.
In honor of Tom McCall, Governor Atiyeh has arranged a state funeral. McCall's body will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda from 5 o'clock Tuesday afternoon until 5 o'clock on Wednesday. Funeral services are scheduled for 7 o'clock Wednesday night in the Rotunda. The former governor will be buried near the site of his childhood home Thursday morning. The public is invited to attend all the events. The family asked that any donations be sent to 1,000 Friends of Oregon or the Nature Conservancy. Well, during the last year, Channel 2 News political reporter Paul Hansen and photographer Bill Weaver spent many months interviewing the governor and many of his close personal and political friends. The result was a special documentary entitled A Nice Place to Visit, The Legacy of Tom McCall. Tonight, Paul and Bill bring us some final thoughts about the man named Tom McCall.
Oregon lost her best friend today, a special man who loved her and her people, a true lover. He didn't want Oregon hurt, but he could be hurt trying to defend her beauty, her natural resources, her people. Sometimes they'd tell him he was going too far, too concerned with protection, preservation, not concerned enough with exploitation, wealth, material goods. But he knew. He knew Oregon is different because Oregon is as vulnerable and fragile as it is beautiful and awesome. He pleaded for a balance which weighed those strengths and weaknesses when decisions about the quality of life for Oregon and her people had to be made. He used nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and all those other wonderful tools of communication to tell the Oregon story. Oregon told her story, too. Together they made a great team. He was tall, like her trees. His mind, like her land, was rich and fertile. His logic, like her shoreline, was as idealistically complex as it was realistically simple and practical. His understanding of the balance between the need for money and the other things which really matter seems not unlike Oregon's commitment to urban growth in its place, the natural resources in theirs. He tasted defeat, but petty retaliation was never an option. He accepted today's partial victory, carrying forward the spirit of the need to search for tomorrow's solutions to today's problems. And he included those who disagreed with his ideas in hopes of finding the better way. He didn't shut you out. He brought you in. He liked to have a drink every now and again, catch a fish, tell some good stories, share ideas, get excited about this or that, wanting Oregon and her people to win, taking bold action if either Oregon or her people could lose. He wasn't always right, but he didn't have to be. It was more important to care than to quit, more important to give a little than lose a lot. He was a son and a brother, a husband and a father. There really wasn't much of him we didn't know. He was like Oregon. It's right there. You can see it, you can judge it. The fools will be the first to see the weaknesses and shortcomings, the last to understand the spirit, which is both of them. The people he loved can help carry on that spirit. It won't be easy now because he is gone, and he was a leader, a natural leader. Oregon lost her best friend today, and so did we.